All right. Hello, everyone. Welcome to Author Profiles and Research Impact. So today we're going to talk about your contributions to the scientific community, the health sciences community, public health, and then also how to measure it and communicate that. So this is a screenshot from a Netflix show called Charité. Has anyone watched it? It's kind of like a corny drama. It's not actually very good, but it has some good clips of, biomedical scientists deep in the throes of discovery. And so this is a scene where this is supposed to be Emil von Behring, and he thinks he has a cure for diphtheria, but all the rabbits are still alive. So sad face for everyone that's there. But we do support publishing negative research results, so don't get the wrong idea from this. Okay, I'll take a step back and introduce myself. I'm Jacob White. I'm a health sciences librarian at Dykes Library, and this is Rachel Vukas. She's going to be collaborating on this presentation with me. She's the Assistant Director of Research and Learning. Okay, so the medical school library at WashU, the Becker Library, has been a leader for a long time in measuring impact assessment in health sciences research. And they maintain a lot of really great resources on this impact assessment website down here, including glossaries and readings and things like that to sort of understand all the varieties of ways that the research that people do here on this campus get disseminated out into broader society, including these 5 key ones: advancement of knowledge, clinical implementation, community benefit, legislation and policy, and economic benefit. So while Emil Behring's initial experiment there was a disappointment, we could sort of envision all the ways that a cure for diphtheria eventually would come to contribute to society in these 5 ways. Today, I wanted to show one more thing about the picture. If you look here, it's a little blurry, but you can kind of see that there's a camera there. And so this would have been an early new instrument of communicating discovery, is the camera. And that sort of sets up that today the main instrument is the electronic journal. And so we kind of have a world where you don't have to wait for the library to open to find what you want to read, and you don't have to see if someone else is, well, we're getting there, see if someone else has a copy checked out or anything like that. There's subscriptions, but the electronic journal article has sort of made it so that medical libraries are 24/7 wherever you are at your convenience. And so this is an example of, obviously, what an electronic journal title page would look like. And there's just so much advancement that has happened in digital computing, desktop information technology since even the last 50 years that has made it much, much easier to share your research, share your results, and even share supplementary information about your research and share data, things like that. So the good thing about that is that so much of the time that librarians used to spend looking over your bibliography or helping with proofreading and stuff now goes more towards telling whether something that's been published is actually worth reading or whether it's worth including, and sort of separating the chaff, because at this point it's just so much easier if you can imagine all the formatting and things. So Dr. Estelle Brodman was the library director at Becker Library at WashU for a long time, and she understood very well that measuring impact starts with proper citation. And so we agree it's never been easier than now to find a article, an item that someone's referring to that has been poorly cited, if they forgot the author of the journal. We all know the ways that you can find that, especially if it was published recently. But it's gotten even easier to just do it right the first time and to just have the proper citation in your article. And that helps really get the ball rolling with measuring impact, because if we don't have all the citation information, we can't really explain who's working with who, how people are learning from each other. So we have EndNote X9, and we have a great guide for EndNote X9, and I know some people have gone to Prasanna's excellent EndNote presentations to learn more about how to use EndNote. But research impact really starts with proper citation. People have to understand what you're aiming for. And then you can say things like, this article was cited X number of times, this article cited X number of other articles that are discoverable. Those are more traditional bibliometrics. Recently, with the advent of the digital computer, we've also had networking, social networks, the web in general, and those metrics for research impact are measured in what's called Altmetrics, which is a really broad array of basically things that are not traditional bibliometrics. So this is traditional bibliometrics, as many of us have probably seen here. And if you look, you can see that I have my Find It at KUMC button on my Google Scholar, so I would recommend that everyone do that. And then you can see how many times all of these items have been cited. So that's traditional bibliometrics. That's just one example, the number of times. And then we have altmetrics. So what makes altmetrics different? They're faster than bibliometrics. So a traditional citation, you have to go through the publishing process, peer review, everything like that for all these other citations, which means that it takes them a little longer to come out. So altmetrics can more immediately measure the influence of an article before the rest of the citation environment catches up with it. What are some disadvantages of altmetrics? They might be manipulated. We've seen how easy it is to manipulate statistics on social media. Obviously, sometimes this can be a pretty competitive environment, so there is some incentive to maybe play up your altmetrics a little more than you might necessarily. And then other things, some of the things that it measures is the popular press is going to cover some things more than others. So if we're measuring how often things get blogged about or they get talked about on Facebook or they get covered by local news, we know that clickability is going to be a factor there. And so that's sort of where media and scholarly communication intertwine a little bit. And you have to be aware of that. So at this point, altmetrics is still an idea that's less than 10 years old. We're still sort of getting a grasp on it, as with all elements of social media and networking and social networking. So it has some really exciting possibilities, and we'll look at an example. So this is an article that really took off that was published in November. We can see sort of why it took off. It's about preschoolers and screen time, which is parenting is a big popular press topic. Things that are about parenting are going to get covered. And then we can see that it was written about by 113 news outlets, 7 blogs. It's been tweeted almost 800 times, 12 Facebook pages. It's on a Wikipedia page. And Altmetric captures some of these news stories. So any news article that Altmetric has found that discusses this is going to be there. And so this sort of hits a perfect confluence of reasons why an article's altmetrics would really take off. I mean, if you looked at this article's traditional bibliometrics right now, it was published in November. It might not have many citations, but we can tell that it's clearly influential. And Altmetric tells us that it's in the top 5% of all research outlets. It was published by JAMA in one of their journals. That is another reason, journals that have some mainstream recognition are also more likely to sort of get carried over into the news outlets. And I wanted to mention one other thing, though, about altmetrics, and it's something that we think about when we're doing collection development at the library also, which is that just because someone has clicked on the article, that doesn't necessarily mean that they've spent a lot of time on it. So if you were, giving a poster presentation and 50 people looked at your poster for 1 minute, is that the same as 10 people looking for 5 minutes? These are sort of questions that, as far as what spurs collaboration, we have to still sort of think about. So clicks are not necessarily everything. I see Brad over there nodding his head. Brad is our e-resources librarian, so he thinks quite a bit about what does it mean for an article to be requested, how many clicks do this textbook have, things like that. those also really matter a lot for Altmetrics. Just because someone saved it for later, we don't necessarily know that they read it. So just to go over these items one more time, we have this donut. That's like the famous Altmetric donut. You can see it's kind of their logo. And then the tweets are in the blue, the news is in the red, and the donut, once you've seen enough Altmetrics, you can kind of get an impression of the influence of the article by looking at it. We can also see Altmetrics in databases. So this is in CINAHL, PlumX. We see how many times the abstract has been looked at, various other usage statistics. And one thing to think about when we're looking at usage statistics is not all journals get the same amount of views. So, NEJM or JAMA, they might get lots and lots of views. And so an article that's going to be published there, it might be worth sharing how many views the abstract got because it looks like a really big number. More obscure journals, you might want to share what percentile your publication was in. So if your article was viewed more in the 80th percentile, in numbers it might not look that important, but you can measure the influence also by using percentiles. And when we're working with you guys to help present this kind of data to show to a supervisor or to show to a potential employer or something like that, we can sort of help you decide the best way to present it. Do we want to show the percentiles? Do we want to show the views? Whatever it's going to be to put your best foot forward for promotion or hiring or anything like that, where you might want to communicate how influential your work has been. One other way you can sort of get your name out is by participating on social media. And you can publicly display your scholarly works. You could link to the abstract page. With copyright permission, you could share your works. In your bio, you can promote your expertise and your research interests. And then journals are increasingly encouraging people to talk about their articles online. That's beneficial to them. It says, hey, we're a really influential journal. People are talking about us. But it's also a good way for you to get your name out. So this was just an example. They're having a new case study series, and then they want people to discuss whether they thought the case was handled well on Twitter with the hashtag GYZone. So a lot of journals are increasingly having things like this where they want people to tweet along or just share and discuss on social media. And so in your respective fields, I would recommend looking out for opportunities like that. It could be a good way to get your name out and to find possible collaborators. So I'm going to pause there on citation metrics, and we're going to talk a little bit more about author profile and reputation. So I'm going to hand it over to Rachel.
Thanks. Okay, now I understand this is supposed to face up, and I didn't think about that when I wore this. I should have worn a jacket. So hopefully that will work. Okay, we're going to look at various academic profiles, and we're going to look at some of the most commonly used. PubMed from my bibliography from PubMed, Google Scholar Citation Profiles, ResearchGate, and ORCID. And I left my ORCID bookmark. We do have information about ORCID. I'm going to talk about it later, but we have these bookmarks that tell you how to create your ORCID ID and little stickies that can go on your computers or whatever. I decided I'd wear mine. That's the little ID logo. I'm starting with my bibliography from PubMed because this is a good way to get your publications all gathered together, and you can display this or you can use it to put your publications in another source. It's managed through a My NCBI account from PubMed. You can easily update it through a personal search alert on your name as the author. And you get emails that say, is this your publication? And you can say, yes, add it to my bibliography. You can also do manual entry. You can add in conference papers and posters or journals that may not be indexed in PubMed. So you can make it a very thorough bibliography. One of the benefits is that it will link to ScienceDB. And that allows you to create your NIH NSF BioSketch. It helps you with it. And you can just automatically link your publications from my bibliography into your NIH Sketch. And it's with the public URL. You can make your My Bibliography public with a URL, and you just add in that URL and that links it. You can also place your URL on a web page. You can put it as a link on your email. I have mine there. It says My Publications. You can call it whatever you want. And you can also send it to your colleagues. You can put the link on your CV, whatever. This is what it looks like. And as I said, it's very easy to manage. You can also have a delegate that manages it for you. So it can be very beneficial to use, especially in the health sciences. Google Scholar Citation Profile is probably one of the most visible ways you can get your information out. It's also very easily done. The reason it's so visible is because it's so easily discovered. Someone Googles your name and they will find a link to your Google Scholar Citation Profile. Not only can you add your university affiliation, but your research interests, and you can see it gives you a title list, but it also gives you times cited by, and it will highlight the top one. This was published in 2002, and it's been cited 1,400 times, the top one. It also gives you a graphic display of your citations per year, and then it has, that's your main research impact. It also shows your H-index and an I-10 index that's unique to Google, and that is a list of your publications that have been cited within the last 10 years. So that's what that number is. Your H-index that I'm sure many of you have heard of, and people will say, what is your H-index? Depending on what resource you get it from, your H-index is going to differ. It is not going to stay the same. And that's because they're looking at different resources. Yes, you may have all of your same publications listed in Google Scholar as you have in Web of Science or another source, but it is looking at different items that may have cited you. Google Scholar can be larger, but sometimes it is missing some articles that are in certain journals. It can include some other areas that you might be cited by a conference poster, things like that. And you can add conference posters and presentations to this as well. You just have to add them manually. So it's very easy to create. Web of Science, you may have heard of Web of Science from Thomson Reuters. It is now owned by Clarivat Analytics, but it is the same wonderful tool. And this is regarded as the standard H-index if you're going to report it. You can create an individual citation report within Web of Science, and it gives you a lot of data. It's again showing your total number of publications, what your H-index is, and how many citations, the average citations per item. This person has been cited over 2,633 times, but what is unique is that it will give you without self-citations. And there will always be some self-citations because you're doing related work. Then it lists the number of citing articles, and again, without self-citations. The graph shows the number of articles cited per year. And so this is a great tool, and we can show you how to do it. It's not that difficult. It's mainly searching on your author name. But you have to make sure that your author name is correct, and we're going to talk about that when we get to ORCID. Web of Science also has a second page that goes in deeper and will show you how many citations. It'll list those individual articles and show you how many citations they've received, and you can then go in and even find those articles that cited you. So it goes into quite a bit of depth. ResearchGate is very popular. A lot of people use it. One of the benefits of ResearchGate is that it really promotes networking. And you can see it gives you many of the same citations, statistics, 15,940 citations total. How many reads? And 2,680 reads. However, if you look at that definition of a read, that could be a look at an abstract, that could be a download. You know, we don't know if they're going to read that download. So it's, you know, but they explain it, and that's what the little I for in the information. So they explain how they measure that. Also, you can get recommendations on an article. You can see that Dr. Gerard has 40 people following him, or no, he's following 40 people. He has 101 followers. And it also will list the top co-authors. I just broke it off at that. He has a lot more co-authors there. And this is just the statistics overview. Now, their total research interest is indicates how many, they've got a score that they come up with for each item, whether how many times it's been read or downloaded or so forth, and then they add all that score together, and that's how they come up with the total research interest. The more people are talking about you on ResearchGate or asking you questions or emailing you, that score goes up. Also, if you connect with other people, if you contact other researchers that you may want to collaborate with, or if you ask a question about an article, I'm involved in a few questions I'm following. And it really, most of them have to do with bibliometrics, actually. It's pretty interesting. That number goes up because it's showing how much activity you actually have. There's also a second page. There's a lot more depth on their statistics, but their RG score is the one that they add up with all of the individual items. That's the 3658. It also gives you an H index, but again, it's not necessarily going to match what Web of Science gave you, because it's looking at an H index for the articles that are listed in ResearchGate and other, you know, so it's not always the same. But it does list the top cited research item, and it gives you a breakdown. So the RG score on this one is built mainly from publications, but it's also from followers. And what's really nice is the percentile. Dr. Gerard's score is higher than 95% of all ResearchGate members. So it's pretty nice to see something like that. And so it can give you a lot of information. A couple of caveats about ResearchGate. They constantly, well, I shouldn't say constantly, but they really promote wanting you to upload your full text. And you don't always have permission to do that. And so they frequently get notices, takedown notices from publishers, and they have to take down that article. So you need to be able to make sure, and we can help you with that, to make sure you have copyright clearance to be able to upload an article. Also, ResearchGate doesn't connect with ORCID. You can add your ORCID ID to ResearchGate, but you can't upload and link with it. So that's another difficulty with ResearchGate. Oh, and I wanted to mention, I'm going to go back to Web of Science. They have a researcher ID, which you may be familiar with. It's changed, and it now goes to the platform of Publons. So one of the things it will do in Web of Science, it will automatically, if you register for a researcher ID and give them your appropriate name that you're publishing by, it will automatically add in all your citations, like if you're creating a unique citation analysis. And so it will give you your articles and tell you how many times they've been cited, and it will update that constantly. It also allows you to include items in Publons like peer-reviewed articles that you have peer-reviewed. You can list those. Journal affiliations, if you're editing a journal or a guest editor, you can include things like that that are not always included on other areas. And Web of Science can be uploaded into ORCID. There is a method to doing that. Now, I've been mentioning ORCID a lot, and we have a problem with names. Name conventions are not standard. If you have a really common name, like Dr. Peter Smith, or you've changed names, like unfortunately I have a couple of publications under my maiden name, and most of them are under my married name. And I would recommend to any woman, don't change your name. But I didn't know I was going to be doing that much publishing back then. Also, no one ever spells my name right. You think of differences like compound names, Van Dyke, hyphenated names, or apostrophes, O'Brien. Is it listed with the apostrophe or not? And so those are problems when they're trying to identify all of your publications. And when you are searching your name in various different sources, it may come up different ways. Even if you always use your middle initial, somehow it didn't get transferred to the author name on that article. And so you have some with your middle initial and some not. So the answer is an ORCID ID. And what that does is it's a unique number that will follow you and connect all of your publications through all of your research. All you have to do is include it on your research. We recommend that everyone get an ORCID ID. And that's what these little bookmarks are for. It tells you how to register. It takes about 5 minutes to get an ORCID ID. And then you can put your ORCID ID on all of your grant applications, all of the articles you're submitting for publication. In fact, most journals will now ask you for your ORCID ID on your article submissions. It's becoming more and more common. It is free to register. You can add your ORCID ID on your email signature, and people can, looking at your email, can click on it and see all of your publications. That is if you populate it. With the ORCID ID, you can just register for it, and then you can add it to your publications as you go. You can add it to one of your other profiles, such as ResearchGate or Google Scholar. You can add it to those profiles so people have a link to it. You can also populate your profile on ORCID. And that will allow you to add as much as you want or as little as you want. Your current research institution, you can add in your research interests if you want. I haven't done that on mine. You can add your title of employment, various things, and then you can add all of your publications. It's really easy on ORCID because it uses Crossref to identify a lot of the publications. So when you first start it, it's not hard to populate it, and it's essentially yes, no, is this my article? And as I said, you can upload it from my bibliography and some other things like that. And there are instructions to do that. So ORCID is becoming the standard. It is now involved globally in 500 different systems. And it's used primarily for grants and for different publishers, but it's also being used in research information management at universities and other research institutes. And it's probably going to be the global standard because it has been developed as a unique identifier. It is a nonprofit company. They're just trying to make research more easily accessible. There is no charge for your ID. They aren't making money off of it. There's no commercial. It's not a commercial entity. So we recommend highly that you do that. And if you need help, we can help you, but it's a 5-minute process. Now, everything that we've been talking about today and is on a guide called Publishing Research. We have several research guides, or live guides as they're called, on our linked from our homepage under a link called Research Guides. And the one on Publishing Research has a section on bibliometrics and research profiles. And so if you want to review things that we've said today, you can look there. If you want more detail, such as looking at journal impact factors, we can get that in journal citation reports out of Web of Science. There are a lot of other different statistics. There's an eigenfactor that is a weighted account of the importance of the article. I would say use Altmetrics and use traditional bibliometrics because that makes sense and most people can understand them. One of the things that I've seen researchers doing is, as Jacob was saying, promote your research on social media. I've had friends promote their research on LinkedIn, and I think of LinkedIn as a business-related source, but this was a librarian talking about her research, and hey, I've just had a new publication, you can link to it here. Many people use Twitter. If they have some Twitter followers or if you're in a group, there's a medical librarian's Twitter group. And I'm sure there are groups that are related to your research and your profession and that you may want to follow. I don't do a whole lot with Twitter, but I do like to attend the monthly Twitter meeting. What's it called? There's another word for that. Chat, thank you. It's a chat where we're all together on Twitter, and so those are interesting. And yes, I use Facebook a lot. I use LinkedIn a lot. Twitter is something I haven't gotten into that much, but what's really great is have you been to conferences where they have a current Twitter feed going on? Yes. And so that is really great. You can get a lot of information about what's going on in another session or who said what in your session. So anyway, we encourage you to get your research out there. And the best way to do it is with a couple of profiles. I've talked about 4 today. I would not recommend doing all of them. I have all of those profiles, ResearchGate, and I think I even have an Academia EDU, which I don't use very much. But I have all those just so I could learn how to do them and could talk about them and understand them. But I would recommend 2 at the most because you really can't keep all of them updated, and it's not really worth it. You may choose to do My Bibliography in Google Scholar, or maybe you want to do ResearchGate and My Bibliography, or ResearchGate and Google Scholar. It doesn't matter, but I would say, you can get by with one if you just do ORCID, or if you want to do 2, that's fine, but I would say don't do more than that because it's just too much work and not sure it's worth it. So Jacob is going to talk to you about a challenge we have for you.
Yeah, so this would be the first time we would try this, and it would sort of just be a pilot thing for this year, and then next year we would try to expand it out a little more and get some more support for it. But the idea would just to sort of be to come away from today's session and take some baby steps towards improving your collaboration and reputation in global scientific communication. And these are just some real small steps you can do. So we've discussed all of these, and like Rachel said, don't take a huge chunk off right now and go home and make a whole bunch of profiles and stuff. But if you wanted to, the best place to probably start would be with a MyNCBI account. And then tomorrow, we might send you a gentle reminder about making an ORCID account. And then if you want to make a Google Scholar profile on Wednesday, or you could also claim your Web of Science author page. If you go to Web of Science and find an article that you've published and you click on your own page, if you haven't done that, you can see what information is out there about you on Web of Science and claim that page. And then on Thursday, maybe explore a research data archive, a place that people deposit research data associated with their publications, like Figshare, and just have a look at it, maybe deposit something. But the idea is just to sort of get the ball rolling on getting more and more people engaged in making an ORCID, having a MyNCBI, some of these early steps towards really boosting your research clout online. And that is all. Again, I'm Jacob White, and this is Rachel Vukas. We're from Dykes Library across the street, and we would love to help you with anything associated with this. If you want to look over your own bibliometrics, if you want to look at your own altmetrics, if you want to make some decisions about how best to present this sort of information for promotion or tenure or prospective employers, we would love to consult with you on that. And so feel free to give us a call or to make an appointment online. And I'm going to open up for questions, and I think that Rachel or I will take them if there's any questions. Thank you.